Hi, everybody. I see Jim, Dave, and Sharon. Let me know if you can hear me. If I need to turn my volume up, I will. Thank you, Sharon. I was looking for something appropriate to play in the meantime. Oh, loud and clear. That's good. All right. We are here to discuss creating a presence in an online class. And I don't know why my video there has me all scrunched together, but I assure you I'm not that skinny. But anyway, I don't know why earlier at noon it didn't look that way, but maybe it didn't. I just didn't pay attention. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with this, and we'll take it from there. Creating a presence in an online class is what we want to discuss today. And I wanted to start off with just a couple of things to kind of set up the discussion. And first, I don't remember how this came up, but my wife and I were discussing this, and something we were reading or talking about talked about the myths about teaching an online class. And when I started teaching online 9 years ago, almost 9 years ago, I probably believed these as well. And the first thing is that teaching an online class, you're not teaching, you're just facilitating or moderating the class. And the second myth is that teaching online is easier than teaching in the classroom. Just to give you a little background on my who I am, I forgot to mention that, didn't I? I have been teaching for about 9 years now, almost 8.5, probably more accurately. I teach. I've been teaching here at Moody for about a year. I teach a faculty training course that we just ran. We're just finishing up this last couple of this last week. I also do some mentoring of faculty at another Christian institution, and just love teaching. I have a master's degree in education with an emphasis in post-secondary and adult education, as well as a Master of Arts degree in biblical and theological studies. And I'm currently looking at starting a doctoral program. I what had started one, and something happened. My name? Oh, I didn't tell you that. My name is Jim Harger. That's right, because I'm logged in as Janet. So thank you, Jan. I forgot to include all this stuff. In the last slide, I've got my name and contact information. But as I said, I started a doctoral program this last year, and something happened where I couldn't complete the first class. And I've had a little change of thought on what I want to pursue now. So I'm actually going to, am looking seriously at starting again. So anyway, myths about teaching an online class. You're a facilitator and moderator, not a teacher, and teaching online class is easier. Well, I can tell you from personal experience that teaching in seat is probably easier, at least in my opinion, simply because of, when you teach an online class, you have to be engaged with your students much more, I think, than you do in an in-seat class. I mean, we sit and have a face-to-face time with our students each week, but then you don't have a whole lot of interaction unless they reach out to you with specific questions, things like that. Whereas online, you're engaging with your students 3, 4, 5 times a week. You're not, in addition to responding to emails and things like that. So I think there's a big difference. And as I said, I think it takes more time. For one reason, uh, there's more communication going on, since that is the primary way that you reach out to your students in an online class through email, chats, discussions, and things like that. I believe there is a little more communication going on, at least on a day to day basis. I'm teaching a class right now at another school where I get an email from a couple of students in one class every day, whether I need it or not. And I joke about that, but it's a new course it's an introductory course for new students, and so they're both trying to get acclimated to Blackboard, and so they have a lot of questions, and that's fine. That's what the course is all about. So I have a lot of communication with them. You still have to grade students' work just as you do in an in-seat class. In fact, there may be even more grading because more of it takes place online, where some of it in an in-seat class may take place in the classroom, and then the grading is a little different. And then finally, we still are expected to support students' learning just as much as in the classroom. So I think all these three components of online education amount to more time. I think we spend more contact hours in many ways with our students in an online learning environment. There's some things to consider as we talk about creating an online presence. The first is, or the one I want to focus on today, is how students engage in a course. There are three specific ways. The first is students are behaviorally engaged and they do what students are supposed to do in class. They adhere to the rules and the norms, and they display behaviors associated with persistence, concentration, and attention. They may ask questions and contribute during discussions. Then you have emotional engagement, which reveals students' attitudes toward learning. Those attitudes can range from simply liking what they're doing to deeply valuing the knowledge and skills that they are acquiring. And then third, there is a cognitive engagement, which involves effort and strategy. It's wanting to understand something and being willing to go beyond what's required in order to accomplish learning goals. And those who are cognitively engaged use strategies associated with deep learning. But that we use all of these in forms of engagement. They are, although they're defined separately, as it says there, they don't function that way. They are dynamically interrelated within the individual. The general consensus is that engagement is easily influenced. It responds to external forces such as the classroom climate in the course, and that leads us to questions of greater interest to instructors, which is what teacher actions or interventions promote more and deeper student engagement, and that's what we're going to talk about. By the way, this PowerPoint will be posted if it's not already in our faculty page, and the link to the article that I referenced this from is in the PowerPoint. So what teacher actions or interventions promote more and deeper student engagement? Creating an online presence. So let's spend the rest of the time this evening talking about how we create that presence. And these are things that I'll be honest with you are more of what I've come up with through my own experience in teaching online classes at three different institutions. I used to teach in seat at a fourth one, but gave that up when it became just too much to do. I couldn't keep up with everything, so I had to limit myself. And so that was a couple of years ago when I had to let one of those go. But the first way that we create a good online presence is through the use of announcements. And the way I do these, the first one is, you probably all do the same. We post some sort of a weekly overview highlighting the topic of discussion and going over assignments that are due that week. We may spend a little time talking about specific things that we look for in assignments. For example, I often discuss in the first week my expectations for discussions, the timeliness, the support, the participation. So I'll make a point to emphasize getting involved in the discussion early in the week, no later than Friday, and then participating on 2 additional days so that the students all participate in the discussion on 3 different days throughout the week. I encourage my students to support their comments using our reading material and other things as applicable. One thing I tell students when they, and this is a little side note, if their support ends up being all outside of the course room work, depending on the level of what it is and things like that, I commend them for that, but I ask them not to do so at, and ignoring our classroom work. I think it's important that our students read our courses, understand it, they apply it in this current situation. And then finally, I talk about participation, how often to participate and things like that. One other thing I do in my announcements is I record a video and then post it in YouTube, and then I embed that video into to the announcement. I like doing that because it to reach our students in different ways. I also text the contents of my announcements. I don't get into every word that's spoken, but I'll have a good written announcement about the content or of that overview, and then I'll read through it and add things, ad lib, whatever. So when I do it that way, when I have the video and the text, I'm hitting the learning skills of hearing, uh, visual learners, as well as which incorporates both viewing and reading. So I try to hit that all three ways. The other thing that I found through my experience of using videos is that the students, I get comments all the time that students really appreciate the videos because it helps them to identify with me, to relate to me, helps give a more welcoming environment in an online class rather than a cold environment where they may see a picture of me, but they have no idea of how I interact with them. Where the videos, such as we're doing right here, you get a little better idea of what, a little bit about me, who I am as a person, and things like that. So I receive comments about that from students everywhere. I started doing that when I started teaching here at Moody and found such great value in it that I now carry that over to the others. You don't have any sound. I see it still coming through, Dave. Yeah, that's the best thing to do is to close out, open up. Jim, are you still with me too? I can see my microphone moving. Okay, good. Just so it must be a bandwidth issue. Okay, so weekly announcements. I also will post a midweek announcement, and this could be a variety of things. Good. Glad you're back, Dave. The midweek announcement may be just reaching out, touching base, encouraging them in some way, like making a general comment about how good the conversation in the discussion board is going, or something along those lines. I may post a short video with some comments about something that I've read that's related to what we're discussing that week or something like that. I try to keep those videos short when I do use those. And a lot of times the midweek announcement, I don't do a video at all. I just post something of value to reach out to my students in some way. And then third way I post announcements, you can see an announcement from me typically about 3 times a week. The last one is a follow-up announcement stating that I have graded all the assignments. And I do this for a couple of reasons. And one, I found in my experience that not every student is going to review the grading comments. It always surprises me when I have a one-on-one conversation with a student about their paper or something, and they tell me that they didn't realize that they could see my grading comments. Those are typically new students that are new to Blackboard or whatever the delivery system is. So when I post an announcement, that encourages the students to go and look and review the comments and to reach out to me if they have questions. And in that announcement, I will also post a couple of general comments about what I found in the assignments, such as, the majority of you are using good resources to support your analysis. Those of you that are not, I may have made a comment in my grading comments about the importance of doing so or something like that. I never point or call out anybody by name. Very careful about that with the privacy laws and stuff. But I do tend to state some general comments to help students kind of get a feel for, how the assignments are going and things like that. The second way that we can create good online presence is through the use of discussions. And there are a few different views on what this should look like. The first one is non-participation. There are studies out there and opinions of a lot of instructors who feel that when we participate in discussions, we stifle the conversation. In fact, my wife and I just attended the Teaching Professor Conference in Washington, D.C. a couple of weeks ago, or a couple weekends ago, and one of the comments was made that a lot of times when you go in and make a comment in response to a student's post online, they will look at that as, oh, good, I got the right answer, and that's the end of the conversation. So we need to be careful about that. But not participating at all, I don't think is the right answer either. I generally follow the guidelines of good participation, and I discuss this. We talk about participation as an instructor. I'm not stating that you should respond to every student. But Dr. Russ Meek was a co-teacher with me in the last faculty training course, and he had a suggestion. He creates a spreadsheet with every class, listing all the students in the class, and then he highlights 1 week I'll respond to half the students, and the next week I'll check off the other half of the students, and makes a very deliberate attempt to reach out and comment to every student at least every other week. I think that's a good way, but I also want to stay true to the spontaneous response to students as well. When we post to discussions and participate in a discussion, we're helping to set the tone of the discussion. If students start getting off track or down a rabbit trail that is not productive to the topic, it's one way to help steer it back on topic. There's been a couple of instances where I've had to, squelch a conversation and actually reach out to a student and tell them that I'm deleting your comment and here's why. So, we need to participate and be involved in the discussion so that we're aware of these things. We also want to ask questions to help advance the discussion. A lot of times, if a student does not post any support for their opinions, I'll ask them point blank, Joe, tell me what it is that you've read that supports your opinion. And I warn my students that I will push back sometimes on their discussions, not to challenge them so much in a bad way, but to challenge them to think more critically and to advance the discussion a little further. I also, when I do this and start pushing back, as the weeks go by the time we hit the third and fourth week, my discussions are pretty productive as far as the discussions have become comfortable. The students have become comfortable with my expectations and what I'm looking for in discussions. This also helps me when it comes to grading assignments. If I'm in the discussion 3 or 4 week and I'm reading through all the discussions and responding here and there as I need to, when it comes to grading discussions, then I don't have to spend so much time reading them because I've already read them. I've already made mental notes of things that need to be pointed out in the grading comments. So it helps to speed up my grading of discussions. In fact, I will post a grade for the discussions the morning after the discussion is over. And I do that for a couple of reasons, but one of those is to highlight the fact that the discussion is over. Now we're moving on to the next topic. To do this, it requires blocking out an hour or so 3 or 4 times a week. And if you teach more than one class, of course, you have to adjust accordingly, but it does take time. And then a new approach that I've just recently discovered, if you will, I mean, I've heard of it before, but not in so much detail, is the summary approach. One of the professors down at the University of Denver was at the teaching conference I attended, and she gave a presentation on this, and I'm actually going to meet with her, interview her for a podcast I have, and we're going to discuss this approach because what she is, she posts a summary of each day, 3 or 4 days a week, just kind of highlighting some of the really good comments that were made, and then leading the students to the next level of the discussion. So, for those students that are on task, it really helps to lead the discussion along over the course of the week. Those students that fall behind realize that they're behind and get the importance of being on time, and then they have to jump into the discussion, 2 or 3 days into it already. So I'm going to do some more research on this summary approach, but I think it's a good approach as well. But it doesn't necessarily meet the requirements here at Moody, but it's something to consider. So I'd like to have a conversation with the powers that be about this one day once I've got some more insight onto this. So that's discussions. Participating in discussions naturally is going to create an. Another way is to add content to your course. Now we have to be careful that we don't change the requirements in the course. We don't create additional graded assignments or alter the grading criteria or anything like that. But there are several ways that we can add content to a course and add value as well as our personal um, personality, if you will, our personal distinctions into how we teach and things like that. So one way to do that a mini lecture, and when I say mini lecture, I mean 3 5 minutes, just real, 3 to 5 minutes. I call them ramblings. I'll tell them in my announcement when I post a video of a mini lecture. I'll call it, my ramblings. For instance, I teach interpreting scripture, and I find it very interesting when students get caught up in when we talk about witnessing to other students, non-believers, that we get caught up in using Christianese. We're quoting scripture. We're using terms that we as believers are very familiar with, but that an unbeliever may not understand, and how important it is that we avoid so much Christianese that we actually end up alienating those that we're trying to witness to. So I think it's about a 5 6 minute little dissertation, if you will, that I recorded one day and posted, and I continue to repost that in all my classes. I think it's interesting. So I'll do those types of things once in a while. I don't do them very often, but as I'm led to. Once in a while, I'll do voice over PowerPoint presentations. I tend to keep those fairly short as well. At the other university I teach at, I teach a course on Psalms, and I have PowerPoint presentations on where Jesus is prophesied, if you will, through or foreshadowed through Psalms, things like that. So I have a short presentation on that. I have another one on the genres, and they're simply PowerPoints with my voiceover that I've recorded through something like screencast and then posted to YouTube, and then embed that video as an item in the course. And then, of course, links to videos or web articles that are pertinent to the topic of discussion. Any of these three methods are great ways to create an online presence, just in the same way that you would in an in-seat course. I mean, I'm sure all of us that have taught in-seat courses will bring in copies of an article we read or something like that to have a discussion about. So I do the same thing online. If you're not comfortable with Blackboard as far as adding content, and to be honest with you, I'm not sure if we're encouraged to do that or not. I know at one school in particular, they don't like us doing that because we could mess up the course shell. I happen to be certified in using Blackboard, so I know very well how to use it. So I'm comfortable doing it, and when I can, I will. So the other way to do that is to post announcements, or I will use the student lounge or the cyber cafe in the same way and post things there. In fact, one class I teach, I have student tips that I post for new students. How to write effective discussion posts, how to, things to look at when writing a paper, things like that. So I'll add that kind of thing in the cyber cafe or as an announcement or something like that. I see Sharon typing. You got a question? There you go. Can you send us a copy of your tips? Oh, I don't know. Let me write that down. Now that I mentioned it, I'm going to have to go through and edit them and make sure they're right. Let's see. Send student tips. I'll make those available some way. They're, like I said, they're very fundamental. They're geared towards brand new students just starting out in the world of adult online education. So you may find them useful in some ways. But yeah, sure. And if I forget, Sharon, if I get sidetracked, please send me an email and ask me for them, and I'll send you a response back. My email will be posted on the last slide here as well. Another little bit behind the scenes, but it's reaching out to students through email and or phone calls. And I do this in a couple of ways. Let me go ahead and put both of these up there. the initial discussions are due. So in our case, Friday night, Saturday morning, I'm sending emails out to anyone who has not posted a response to the discussion. Just checking in on them, encouraging them, reminding them that they had an assignment due or a discussion post that was due last night. Do you have any questions that I can help you with before you write your response? But please get involved in the discussion as soon as possible, that kind of a thing. And I get good responses from those. The second time I send those out is Tuesday morning, the morning after the other assignments are due, the papers and things like that. In the same way, just checking on you, wanted to make sure that you were aware that you missed an assignment, something like that. I often get replies back saying, "Oh, I never thought to send you an email to let you know I was going to be late. Something came up this weekend. My mother was in the hospital," or whatever it is. And so a lot of times these emails are just kind of a prompt to let them know that, hey, I notice you're behind or don't want you to get behind. So please catch up on this. And so this helps to create an online presence in, as I said, behind the scenes, but by reaching out individually to the students as needed. I follow the late policy of Moody, Dave. What is it, 5% a day, I believe is what it is. So I will penalize the assignments due on Monday accordingly. If they have a valid excuse, even if they neglected to reach out to me ahead of time, for instance, they had to take their kid to the doctor or whatever, and an emergency came up, I will oftentimes waive that and just remind them in the future, please let me know that as soon as you can. But sometimes that it just can't be avoided. So I will penalize them if there's no valid excuse. I'll leave it at that. When it comes to discussions, I will deduct points according to the rubric. If they're, because what is it, the first area of the grading rubric for discussions says participate in the discussions as required by the instructor or something like that. So I'll deduct the points there. I don't take a percentage off. I will just mark them down. In some cases, it'll be a good 10, 20%, depending on how late it is. But that's how I do it. I think that works out best in that case. So that's a good way. Other things to consider, use the student preview mode. I think it's a great asset. It looks like if any of you are familiar with one of their album covers, it has the eye on it, and that's what this thing reminds me of. So I turn that music on as I'm doing this. No, I'm just kidding. But I will click after I've posted all the due dates and things like that. We go through the individual assignments or through the grade book and post due dates. It's easy to get a week off or miss one because of the way, you can't see them all at once. But in the student view, you can go to the grades and due dates page, and it'll list all of the assignments with the due dates, and it'll tell you if the rubric is there and available as well. So I check that out. So using the student view, I can see what they're seeing, double check myself for due dates. I also use the student view if there's a question about, well, I didn't understand this is what you wanted. Sometimes I'll use the student view to make sure that they're seeing what they're supposed to in the instructions and things like that. Second way is to model the behavior that you expect from your students, right? If we want them to participate in the discussion on at least 3 separate days, as required here at Moody, then I need to participate in the discussion on those 3 different days as well. I need to make sure that I'm using a good tone in all of my announcements and postings to the discussion board. I need to make sure I'm using proper grammar. Even though I have 2 master's degrees, I still go to Microsoft Word, type everything out there, and copy and paste it into the discussion board. I just find that is easier to avoid stupid spelling mistakes. And I encourage my students in one of those student tips to do that very same thing. So, I'm not going to use text ease or shortcuts in my discussion posts because I do not expect them to do so either. Although I will use little emoticons once in a while, smiley face, things like that. I tend to get a little sarcastic once in a while, pick on students in the classroom. It's hard to do that in online environment. misunderstood or misinterpreted. Well, I'll say a comment that I want. I'm joking and use the for emoticon to kind of hide that. I think that's okay. I still want the conversation in the discussions, but I want it done on an academic level as much as possible. So modeled behavior is an important thing. So just to wrap this up, the four areas that we can really create a good online presence is through the use of announcements, interaction and engagement with students through the discussions, adding content, whether it be announcements or just additional reading material that a student may want to take advantage of, and reaching out to our students. So those are the things that I do. And I think if we keep to those four things, we will help to create a good online presence with our students, which of course will enhance their learning. One of the things that we walked away with from this teacher conference is too many times we are so focused on how we teach that we forget how students learn. And we need to reverse our thinking a little bit and focus more on how students learn and then design our teaching to accommodate that. So the last two things to leave you with, how often, these are questions you can answer yourself. I don't want you to raise your hand, so to speak, but how often do you log into your course? Think about that. And then ask yourself, are your students aware of your presence in an online class? And if you can answer that honestly, yes, in both cases, or multiple times and yes, then you're probably on the right track. But if you wonder if your students are even aware that you're involved in the class, maybe we need to stop and re-engage. So with that, I'll open the floor up for any questions. There's my email address, and Sharon, again, my name is Jim Harger. When I know it says Janet up there, but my email is james.harger@moody.edu. I'd love to engage with any of you as far as those of you listening to the recording as well. If you have anything you want to discuss further, push back a little bit on some of my comments or anything like that, then please just reach out and contact me. Absolutely. Sharon, there's a lot of, in fact, Janet Randerson and I have talked a lot about that, how we can incorporate those things into our classrooms. That's something I am still working on. I've never used Google Hangouts, but I'm starting to engage with some people in that way outside of my teaching field. So I'm looking at that and how we can do that. At one school I teach at, I have live chats just like what we're doing now. So there must be a way that we can do the same thing using Google Hangouts and just create an open office kind of a time where students can log in and ask questions. Skype, absolutely, especially if you can do, I think Google Hangouts, as I understand it, would be better because you can get more than one student engaged. I'm not sure if you can do that with Skype, to be honest with you. Group work, again, then you're getting into the content of the course. So you have to be careful about that. As I said, you can't change the requirements, the grading requirements, but if it's something that you can encourage students to do to work together, absolutely. Dave says, I taught the CL 7704 and 5 courses, and that requires Skype every other week with every student. Interesting. I bet it does take a lot of time if you have 22 students in that course and you're engaging with them. I bet that does. What is the course? I'm not familiar with it. Can you give me the name of it? You can do 10 for Google Hangouts. Very good. So you're limited to 10 students, Dave? Is that what you're meaning by that? Oh, leadership coaching, absolutely. I would get that. Yeah, in fact, we just finished a group of instructors through the faculty training course, and now the mentoring piece will take on. And we've talked about how many we can effectively mentor in the same way. I'm mentoring a group of faculty at another school too, and they keep the groups very small for that purpose because there's more phone calls involved. In fact, I've had a phone conversation with two of my faculty at the other school today. So peer editing would be interesting. My wife teaches English composition here at Moody as well as other institutions, and I think she has some pretty strong opinions about peer editing, but I'm not going to speak on her behalf. Maybe those are my opinions that I'm imposing on her. But doing it live would be an effective way to do that. I can see that because then you're able to moderate the peer editing. Cool, good. Before I forget, there's a link there to surveymonkey.com. Make sure that you logged into that site, completed the brief survey to receive credit for attending the Illuminate session. And I know Janet and the rest of the Moody development team or the faculty development team would appreciate that. Dave says, of interest, each class I teach at Moody or USF, I always give an encouraging reply to their personal introductions. I do that too. I don't give the scripture. That's a good thing as well, very good thing. But I think it's important too. In their introductions, I respond to each one. I think that's absolutely critical to welcome them to the course. Good point, Dave. That should be. I'll have to add that to my presentation for next time. Yeah, and that's a good point too, Sharon. I try to log into the introduction discussions early in the week. In fact, yeah, at one school I teach at, they have access to the course a week early, so I'm in it right then and responding to them at that point. I think it's important to establish that connection as early as possible. So that's good. Good. What else? Jim, I see you typing something. I as well personally reply to the personal introduction. Yep, it does, doesn't it? It helps. It helps. Any way that we can respond and reply to our students through email, just a personal, you'll get email from students just saying, hey, by the way, I submitted this assignment. I know it was late. Thanks, kind of thing. I always send them a reply telling them I appreciate them letting me know. Even though we log into the grade book, we can see it's there. I think it's a good habit to just respond to students' email. In fact, that's one of the things I try to model because when I send them an email, I look for a response back to let me know that they've read it, understand it, and if they have any questions. Interested in the student preview mode? It's if you go into Blackboard, let me think. You know where the edit button is in the top right of the corner? It's right next to that, to the left of that. And like I said, it looks like it's like a circle with a curve above and below it. So it looks like an eye to some degree. So if you click on that, it takes a second to load, but then it'll tell you with a big banner across the top, you're in the student preview mode. And then you have to exit out of that when you're done with it in order to get back to the instructor view. Yeah, take a look at that. I think you'll find it helpful if for no other reason, just to double check your due dates. Green dot middle of the lines. That's the edit button, isn't it? It's a green dot. The eye is right next to that. I don't have it open right now, so I'm not looking at it. You don't see the big eye. Okay, now you got me curious. Hang on. I'm going to open it up. This is when I play Jeopardy music in my other class when I'm doing something. Oops, now I lost you. Where'd you go? Here. There. Okay, let me log in real quick here. Give me just a second. Open up a course. Okay, so it's the top bar once you're in your classroom. You've got over on the left, you've got the house with the drop down and announcements. Over on the other side, you've got the eye and then another button, which is the color change course theme button, and then an edit mode on or off. That eye is just a little gray circle with an arrow going to the left above it and an arrow to the right or going to the right below it. Let me see. I don't think you have to have the edit. Oh, you got it. Okay. It's there whether the edit mode is on or off. Good. Well, that's one takeaway. It's always good to have a takeaway from these. Anything else? I appreciate you all hanging out and having a conversation. But I don't want to keep you. These are supposed to be kept to around 30 minutes, so I don't want to keep you any longer than we need to. But I am perfectly happy having this discussion. Good. Thank you, Dave. All right. Well, if you have any questions that come up or anything you want to talk about, for those of you listening to the recording as well, please reach out to me at james.harger@moody.edu. I've got an office phone number. I didn't think to put any of that stuff on there. My wife's name is Elizabeth, and she teaches English composition here online as well. Hasn't I think she's taught 2 or 3 courses. I'm not sure. She teaches at a total of 5 different institutions, uh, mostly Christian organizations, but one community college as well. So she keeps busy with all of that. It takes her so much longer to grade papers because of the nature of her business, as I'm sure it does you, Sharon. Yeah, she gets frustrated when I walk out of my office because we work here at home. This is all we just teach. That's all we do anymore. And I'll walk out of my office, kind of stretching my arms out. Oh boy, that was good. 2 hours and I'm done. And she's on like her third paper, and then she gets kind of frustrated with that. Yeah, why didn't you choose math? That's all graded automatically, isn't it? That would be good. Well, theology's not much better, is it? I mean, there's things, a lot of things we can comment about from that. All right. I think it's supper time. Oh, yeah. That's good. Yeah, I tend to teach pretty much the same courses over and over again as well. Jim, please. Uh, yeah, when you teach a new class, that takes a lot more time, doesn't it? Just getting used to it. All right. I appreciate you all being here. It's always more interesting to have a discussion with people than to talk to myself, although Beth would accuse me of doing that once in a while. You all have a great rest of the evening, and I'll look for you out there in the cyber world of education. All right, everybody, you all take care. See you later.